Today is Palm Sunday. In the church, we've had a long-standing tradition of having one really weird Sunday right before we get to Easter, and it serves a number of different purposes. But as it is with so many of the different traditions of the church, we also play with that tradition up here. And so normally right now you would be hearing a number of readings, and we would have a sermon. We're going to scratch the readings and the sermon. We heard a reading downstairs just a moment ago. If you were outside, you could hear the reading that they had. I want to tell you about it in just a moment. And at the end of today's service, you'll hear the story of Jesus' arrest and trial and crucifixion. So that's how we conclude the service. This day is all about remembering, and at some level even sort of re-experiencing some of the story of Jesus last week. How he entered into Jerusalem, how he shared a Last Supper with his disciples, how he was then arrested and tried and crucified, all to prepare us for our yearly celebration of Easter, which will be just next Sunday. So what we've done with the tradition up here is we start off with that story of Jesus entering into Jerusalem, and then we're going to go fairly sequentially through the rest of the story. Our Eucharistic experience, our experience of communion that we have every Sunday, is a way of carrying forward the story of and experiencing the story of the Last Supper. So having just heard the story of Jesus entering into Jerusalem, the next thing we'll do is say our prayers and have communion. At the end of communion, just as it was at the end of his Passover meal with his disciples, we will hear the story of what happens next in his life. Our service will end that way today, and we will leave in relative quiet and silence, having prepared ourselves, I hope, for the week ahead. I just want to share one brief thing about that preparation. So I imagine that an experience that most of us have in common is that sort of world-shattering experience of grief and pain. And I want you, don't think about it too much, but just remember that one of the things that happens, I think, when we are in the middle of tremendous pain and grief is that we simultaneously experience everything seeming to rush ahead, full steam. Like, why can't things just slow down for a second? And at the same time, it's almost like we're in the middle of the Matrix. Like, everything slows down, and we can see certain details in unbelievably detailed ways as we watch them pass before our eyes. Today's experience of Palm Sunday, I think, is born out of that kind of grief within the early church. That pain, that searing pain of walking alongside Jesus as Jesus goes to his death, but also seeing it in this incredible detail. And so all the different gospel writers, for instance, have a different version of the story of Jesus entering into Jerusalem. We can take our time, if we really wanted to, and look at the different details. I mean, one of the odd ones for today's Palm Sunday, the story we just heard about Jesus entering Jerusalem, not only does he not enter into Jerusalem, but there are no palms in the story. It's just one of those things. Luke is not concerned with those details because he sees something else. The ability to see the something else is a hallmark of being a disciple of Jesus. To be able to see an extra piece of meaning, to be able to slow down in the middle of our grief and take a look at a deep spiritual presence in our lives, to be able to hold in tension both the celebration of life and the experience of death, or the experience of resurrection right alongside our retelling of the story of Jesus' crucifixion. That's part of what it is to be who we are as a body. So I think Palm Sunday in some ways stands as an invitation to let this week be a way of entering into that story. It's going to seem like it rushes ahead because all of our weeks rush ahead. This service is going to seem like it rushes ahead. In a few minutes, we're going to be celebrating communion together, and that's like 20 minutes earlier than we normally would on a Sunday. Even passing the peace, it's going to feel at some point, I think, like we can't be doing this right now. It's too early in the service. It's going to start to have that sense of tension, just like our lives has that sense of tension. The invitation is to take a deep breath, to find a place of groundedness that will let you open your eyes and your hearts and your minds and And notice the dedication of God's love. Notice the faithfulness of God for humanity that rarely returns that faithfulness. Notice the way in which Jesus approaches this cross with his chin up, knowing that the work he is doing will save the whole world. Notice the small things. Let them change you. Notice the dedication that Jesus has for you. And let our experience of these services, as well as the gift of our lives, be in dedication and as a gift in return for Christ's love. As we move from this moment through the rest of the service, we will say our prayers. Let's begin with this prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, it is by the cross and passion of your Son, as well as in his life and love, that we, your children, are redeemed. We give you thanks for your faithfulness to us, and pray that even now you pour out the abundance of your grace on us, that we might, by contemplating these acts, by participating in the story of your love for us, that we might know more deeply and be more rooted in your reconciling love, and then in turn be agents of that reconciling love in this world. We ask this in the name of one who lived for us and died for us and entered into new life, that he might turn and invite us to share the same. Amen.